Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good evening, wherever you might be today. It is a pleasure and it's a blessing to be with you. And I am not alone. I have friends. There are people who don't think that I have friends, but I do. I have a friend. My name is Jonathan Marshall, something like that. I'm from Toledo, Ohio, and we have number two, brother
George Antonius
George.
from Montreal and Lebanon.
Oh my, from everywhere. And then we have a
From
special
wherever.
guest today, my brother, and his name is Matt Marshall. And Matt, it's good to have you with us today. We've just last second, out of the blue, asked him to jump on with us, and our first guest. And so he didn't have a chance to get all his equipment set up. You know, he's just out of the blue, shooting from the hip. So you hear a little bit of sound in the background. That's my fault. But Matt, it's great to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, that hum actually, thanks for being a leader there, John, taking that responsibility. But it's actually probably my system that is giving the hum because I just threw up a laptop here. But yes, we are out and we just moved. Our family moved to become the senior pastor of Shadow Mountain Baptist Church in Morgan Hill, just outside of the Bible Belt, California. Um, and we became the senior pastor there this summer, and we've been in transition trying to move out here. So we just landed 2 weeks ago. We've had 2 Sundays here at the church and 2 Wednesdays, and it's good to be with you guys today.
Cool.
Okay, this is awesome. We're glad to have you with us. And for those that have been following along, reading along in your book, we are in Genesis. We're up to the 6th day. Brother George, take it away.
All right, so verse 24, and God said, let the earth bring forth a living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing and beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. We can pick it up from there, and then, because he kind of divides the beasts from men, obviously, so we can start commenting on those two verses there.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've got nothing to say until you say something, and then I always take what you say and try to improve upon it.
Well, I've got more questions. I've got
Just
more
kidding.
questions and answers on that. That's good. I've got more questions than any comments on this, to be honest. So, like,
Okay, so what questions do you have?
well, the beasts are not told to multiply and to be fruitful, multiply and fill the earth, as was said to the fish and the fowls. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I still think it's kind of odd. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, he takes the time to tell us that he said that to the fish and the fowl, and they're created on a different day, and that's told to mankind on day 6, but it's not told to the beast. But
Do you think
I
they
don't.
might be included in, I guess not, but he does say it to man, male and female,
Yeah.
since they're on the same day,
Yes. But yeah, and
but it's not
yes,
specifically said.
I guess men are beasts when it comes to that stuff. So why not? The other thing there I see is that in verses 24 and 25 they're called the beasts of the earth, and then chapter 2, in a kind of a second block creation there ad hoc in the garden for Adam to name them, and they're called the beasts of the field. So earth is also called field, and what that reminds me of is when the parable of the tares, where the
That's what I
Lord,
thought of.
yeah, Matthew chapter 13, he says the field is the world. He defines the field as the world. So you already had that kind of definition built in Moses' cross references. So I thought that was cool, and
That
that's
is cool.
pretty much all I've got as far as, like, biblical, as far as not discussing just the diverse creation of beasts. There, we were saying last time that when we imagine the beasts pre-flood, we have to keep in mind that they looked like whatever they look like pre-flood. So the rhinoceri that we know today, and the giraffes and everything else, and the crocodiles and whatever, rhinoceroses, whatever you want to call
Put a
them.
point on the board for George. I've never heard the term rhinoceri.
It's really true,
For the
rhinoceri, but
win. Baller. Baller.
they're all
Yeah, I would
accepted.
I would have attempted rhinoceros. It's like it's like my son say all the time, unbelievable, which is
Wow.
doubly or triply unbelievable. So, rhinoceri, is that what you said?
Yeah, they're both accepted. In English, I get it, they're both accepted.
So, you have a flock of geese, right? You have all those different names. You have a herd of cattle. What are rhinoceri called? What's a group of them? A herd? A
A
herd of
herd?
rhinoceri?
A herd?
Okay.
I think it's a herd.
Quadrangle.
It's a pride of
Okay.
lions, a murder of crows. I don't know what you call
I've
rhinoceroses.
heard a Congress of baboons. That's what I literally.
And how appropriate is that? If it isn't that, it should be that.
Oh my
Too
soul.
appropriate.
Okay, so I liked what you said, building off of Genesis 1 there, where he said, hold on, let me get back to it. Where you said the field is the world, and how the beast of the earth and the beast of the field, and how the Lord said, let the earth bring forth the living creature. And you know that the seed was sown in the field, right? And then the enemy came and sowed tares among them. And just thinking about that connection, as if the Lord is putting stuff out in the field, like he's planting these animals, and just to see, what happens. It's a plant, like it's something he sowed there. And I guess in that I see the creative side of God, not just like, so for instance, we think of God as a creator, and that is of his power to make something out of nothing. And certainly that is an element of it. But who told God what to make, and why did God choose to make what he made? I think it was what we might call creativity, the artistry, the artistic nature of God, that he is planting in the field these beasts, so to speak, and the earth brings forth these beasts. The ability, because God planted in the earth, he gave the earth the ability to bring that forth, and so that was put in there by God. And how sometimes I see a corollary, and the Lord does not stop the tares from growing, right? The Lord does not stop the seed from going in the bad area, so to speak, there in the four different kinds of soil. Of course, in this case, he saw that it was good, but there is bad soil in that New Testament parable, and in other words, it's not so much that God dictates everything that's going to happen in that sense, but that he allows for it within his creative nature and says, so to speak, let's let it develop as it does. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, 100% agreed. And it makes them all the more interesting and manifold in how he creates.
Right.
He's basically not just creating the thing, he's creating the thing and a whole system behind it that can produce more things.
Right, and that is, it ties in well with, of course, with the idea of male and female being created with the ability to multiply. It's that I want you to carry this thing forward. I want you to move forward. And sometimes our culture, if you think about how our culture has been advertised to, it has been like, they say there was no such thing as the concept of teenager until when, like the Roaring Twenties, something like that, when there was
Really?
disposable income. Yeah,
It was
like
it
that.
was earlier and really popularized while Dad was away at war, World War II.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the kid had some disposable income, and so the phrase teenager was really not used until that time frame.
Hmm.
And and the reason I bring that up is because what is a teenager? Well, then you have preteens, and you have tweens, and you have these kids or whatever. It's because of money. So money is the root of all evil, and the whole idea is you are unique and different and special, and there's no one like you, and you are the last of the breed. That's kind of the concept that's in our head. But God's mindset is, I've created you to bring forth something else. You are a channel, right? Matt, looks like you have something to say there.
I did read a book a long time ago called Understanding Today's Youth Culture, and man, they really articulated that. Really what it was is they were creating a new consumer. Teenagers didn't have money or transportation. And when the car was invented and then they put the radio in there, it was this whole new independence for a kid to go where he wants to go, do what he wants to do. But the whole mindset they said behind it, the concept was to create a new demographic of consumer. And so now that they have created that, you see all of the sexualization of kids at a younger age to push them to teenage years. And then you see all the stay a teenager when you get older. How do I stay young?
Yes, yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that. I was just reading an article about written in 1999 about like the rise of the hairless man on TV stations, and how that was glorified and was a throwback to like the days of ancient Greek, where they wanted to keep the look of a prepubescent teen. And there's also, of course, some fornication there involved, but it really is that. It's the glorification of the teenager nowadays. Now, we have to keep in mind this is before the flood, so they're aging a lot slower. But it still holds, yeah.
And what it's interesting to me is you mentioned that there's no command there, be fruitful and multiply. And maybe I'm borrowing across the generations or across the eras to say this, but it seems to me that you are more like an animal when you are self-absorbed and you are not concerned about giving out, giving forward, multiplying. What can I do for someone else? You're more like a beast. And that's like Nebuchadnezzar. When he became a beast, here's a man literally turning into a beast. And what is he? Self-absorbed. He is concerned about his own kingdom, and that is what brought this about. And it's not until he humbled himself before the God of heaven and saw, hey, I'm just a created being. I'm not God. And that then reminds me of the prodigal son, and how the prodigal son ended up wishing that he could eat what the hogs were eating, wishing that he could fill his belly, and thinking of himself as, hey, I'm no better, no different than a hog. Everybody's just got to get what they can. It's not until he came to himself and he said, what am I? I'm connected with someone else. I'm actually under the Father. My role is a son to the Father, not the final human being on the planet. I think that's...
Yeah, go ahead.
So that I think that's the spirit of a beast that goes down to the earth, right? Someone who is just locked into this time domain.
As you're talking about that, this is why I love doing this. It just clicked. You know how they say, and I've double checked this, that hogs can't look up to heaven, and they do have a difficulty. Some of them can, but the statement is somewhat exaggerated. But by and large, it does hold true. Because of the fat on their necks, they can't really look upwards as much as other beasts. And that prodigal, he's in a hog pen. He's with swine, and the Bible says that he looked up to heaven. He said that I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight. So it just struck me that he's in the middle of people that cannot look up to heaven, or species that cannot look up to heaven, but he does in that moment.
It's very interesting.
That is quite intriguing.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I know you can beg, borrow, and steal from every passage in the Bible and force fit it in there. But is it not interesting in our culture how we have more and more people who are wanting to identify as animals?
Yeah.
You've got literally litter boxes in the schools, and people licking their hands off after they eat. What is going on?
In the 90s, at a Christian rock concert, I came across a lady in the youth group. She was like that. She was a cat. I mean, she was acting like a cat in the middle of all of us. I thought that was so bizarre, and now it's almost mainstream.
And how would you in your understanding of history, George, what would you say? I mean, that's a natural progression, right? They did not like to retain God in their knowledge, and
Right.
God gave them over to a reprobate mind. And to what does it say there in Romans 1? To
Um,
Dishonor their own
worship the
bodies.
Dishonor their own. Yeah, that's right.
yeah, but then it says they worship and serve the creature more than the Creator,
Creator.
and how we like to make a distinction. Go preach the gospel to every creature. And we like to make a big distinction between humans and animals, as far as land animals. But God created them on the same day,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
So yeah.
you know,
Well,
what is
Solomon
this
says that
infatuation?
Solomon says that they may know themselves that they are but beasts. So I mean I know that in today's like the nexus of beast to human is a little uncomfortable for us because of evolution's lie, but like we said last time, every heresy has a grain of truth, and you take away reason from man. That's one of the distinctives of a human being, and of course we're really elaborating on verse 26 where God said, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness," and one of the features that distinguish us is the ability to reason. But you take that away, you take God's image away from mankind, and he is a beast. How do we differ if not in the image of God? We don't. Even in our death, we're similar, and Solomon makes that point.
I'm going to throw a question at you, George, and Matt too. I just saw on the internet. I saw this video of a chimpanzee that had been used in medical research and had never seen the outside world. And this female chimp, they release her, and she just looks up, with gratefulness, and she, hops around. I mean, at least the video says that, she'd never been outside. And now here she is, and she's outside, and she's leaping around, so excited and so happy. And I think just for the sake of maybe some of our listeners that have that question in their mind, like, wait a second, what's the big difference between me and a chimpanzee, me and an animal? These are the kinds of things that a lot of people cling to because of the fact that the human characteristics that they have. Does that question make sense to either of you? How would you distinguish between a chimpanzee and a human? Isn't it that a chimpanzee just hasn't had as much time, on the assembly line as we have? It hasn't gone far enough, but I mean, he's just kind of lingering behind.
Well, I don't know that I have any succinct answer for that. I have it kind of in reverse. I had a guy I discipled one time. I think he had one of the greatest answers about evolution, and he said, "If evolution is true, why do the chimpanzees still exist? Shouldn't they be gone by now? Because of getting better. So I would start with someone like that. Why are we living at the same time as them? Is that a legitimate question to ask? I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is. They would answer you that it's part of that line that evolved into part of the ape line that evolved into humans, and the other one didn't. That's their go-to
So
answer.
they are
for that.
just under us in supremacy. Is fact that the fact that they've survived along with us.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would think that over millions of years they would be gone by now.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, they have little answers here and there for that. Doesn't mean they're good answers. And we can get into all the whole evolution thing. But if really the whole premise that evolution depends on time is actually technically inaccurate. It's not a question of time so much as it is a question of generations, and that the evolutionists kind of rarely point out, because the whole idea of time is to accommodate multiple generations. Right, and so they tell you, they'll tell you we haven't observed it in the lab, but over eons and eons, it's so slow that we can't really observe it. But that is simply countered by saying, well, we have living organisms that multiply generationally very, very rapidly, like the bacteria or bacterium, I should say, the E. coli, that you can get sick from. I think usually it's found in chicken. Those reproduce every 20 minutes. They produce a new generation every 20 minutes. And the experiment has been done many times over, where you put it, and over like a few months, you have millions of generations of that bacterium that have been reproduced. and they are the same. They haven't changed into another kind of bacterium. So the whole idea of requiring time is really obviating the point. The point is generational, and we have things that we can observe over millions of generations, and they haven't displayed any increase in the genetic information that they have.
That reminds me when I'm thinking about the characteristics of a chimpanzee or the characteristics of a human that we might see, the projection that we put on a chimpanzee. And we might assume, of course, they're much closer. They've got to be much closer to a human because look at they express their emotions. Like you can see they're happy. You can see like the chimp just pointed, hey, the food on the other side of the glass, bring it over here. Like I saw a chimp do that. But I remember years ago, Matt may remember this. We were down in a church in Florida, and somebody had this parrot that could quote John 3:16, if I remember right. I don't know if it was that or what. Do you remember that, Matt? It was like they could quote lengthy things, and they sound exactly like a human being. And I remember thinking, wait just a second. So the chimpanzees are so much closer, and the primates are so much closer to humans. But here we've got a parrot over here, and I know that there's an evolutionary thing for the birds, but this thing is way advanced. You would not be able to tell the difference between a human being and a parrot's voice if your eyes were closed. And what's happening here? There's this huge disparity. How about this? They all came from a common creator. And
Right.
you're going to have some similar characteristics in all of those things because they have a common origin. And it's always helped kind of lodge in the back of my mind that hearing that parrot and thinking, what? How did he skip arms and legs and everything else and he got the voice? That was great. It was great. So anything else feedback here?
I was just thinking as you said that, even from just a biblical perspective, you could tell someone for James 3:7, for every kind of beast and of birds and of serpents and of things in the sea is tamed and hath been tamed of mankind. So it actually proves man's wisdom and cognitive understanding and involvement. Then, I mean, I've never been interviewed by a chimpanzee. You know what I mean? They're not coming to us for information.
Some would beg to differ.
Well, that's a good point.
It's so funny how we argue that the animal kingdom and here's the levels and they're wise and here's how we can tell they're wise. And you're making the point that even a parrot's closer in communication than even a monkey, right?
Yeah,
but
and the faculty of languages is what distinguishes us. Yeah. Also.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, how would we even be able to communicate with any of these animals? We probably have a better chance with the birds, it seems like.
Yeah.
But I think a greater biblical point you could tell us, look, man, look at all the different animals. You can show fish playing basketball. They've taught fish how to play basketball. And then, they swim the little ball into the hoop. And they play against each other. What's that?
Are you talking about dolphins?
No, I'm talking about goldfish.
Really?
Goldfish. Check it out on YouTube. Goldfish will swim this little ball and put it in the hoop, and then they take it to the other side and swim it into the hoop. It's not that hard.
Well, they say they say that crows are really smart, like wicked smart.
Yeah. The whole corvids family, ravens, crows, magpies, brilliant.
Yeah, and dolphins they say are extremely smart as well, and but it's so interesting how man can take these things that are evidences that could point them to a god, and they can actually turn it around and say, see, there is no God, because just like Pharaoh's magicians duplicated the miracles that Moses was doing, they relativize the miracle by saying, well, if I can copy it or if I can figure out another way, then it really is not divine.
Right.
So just something to keep in mind, the projection. People talk about their animals, and we have a little dog, and you wonder, though, how much are we projecting on animals and saying, see, there's human characteristics. Well, number one, they come from the same creator. Number two, how much of it are we projecting on them and assuming that they understand? Because, like, if they were in the field, if they were in the wild, I don't think they'd be exhibiting the same emotions and
Yeah.
actions.
We had mentioned too in one of the episodes, we're doing the same thing onto AI. We're projecting intelligence and consciousness onto AI when it doesn't have it. So, it's, if anything, it's a reflection of our own creative power rather than what's inherent in those animals. But
What would
since
you
we're
say?
yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was
go
going to say,
ahead.
what would you tell someone that says, "Oh man, look at AI and or even animals, and look at how the intelligence, is there." How would you differentiate that we are actually intelligent and we're projecting intelligence on the animal kingdom or on the
The,
this computer's
that
world?
argument kind of the founder of OpenAI, I forget his name right now, but he kind of contradicted himself in an interview with one of those big YouTubers. I forget his name, but he's basically talking about AI and consciousness and intelligence, and then at the same time, his interviewer references Peterson, Jordan Peterson, he asked the Chat GPT, said, say something positive about Biden and say something positive about Trump, and the answer was longer about Biden, and so they were talking about biases in the AI. And then the founder of OpenAI kind of defends it. He says, well, you shouldn't do that because what you're doing is you're projecting onto AI an anthropomorphic understanding. So when he's answering that question, he says, well, you shouldn't do that because it's not a human being. And then he proceeds in the rest of the interview to discuss AI as if it's a person. And so he anthropomorphizes it, whatever the verb is, later on. I think one of the answers that's given also is John Lennox, who's a mathematician at Oxford, Christian. He actually references his colleague Rose, who won a Nobel Prize for it. And Rose basically argues that machines will never be able to develop consciousness because they're all fundamentally built on algorithms, like yes, no kind of set of rules, strict set of rules that they follow. And whereas the human mind does not work like that. So no matter how much it quote unquote progresses, it can never mimic how the human mind functions short of having a spirit.
I just walked past down the street today and saw a sign that said, "Love me, love my dog." And my first thought was, what if I want to love you and not your dog? What they're saying is, one and the same, and that's what humans have always done. The Lord said, "Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness thereof." What do? We
Uh-huh.
create what we worship. We either worship the Creator or we seek to create that which we want to worship with our lives. And in the manner of four-footed beasts and creeping things and all that, that's included in the prohibitions of false worship. Animals are included in that. You're not supposed to worship, and I can't help but think, and I know people will probably think I'm crazy, but I can't help but think that the rise of Petco and the rise of all the pet stores and the coinciding, now this is probably just a leap in the dark, so forgive me, but Toys R Us goes down and Petco goes up. The idea of what's more important, humans or animals? Animals, immediately. Animals are innocent. Animals are blank slates that you can write anything you want to on and treat them however you want. And because we no longer know how to treat humans, we've transferred our ability to interact with humans onto animals, and we actually treat animals in many cases better than we treat humans.
Yeah.
It's just that's a kind of an out there theory, but I've thought a lot about that because of because of our inability to interact with one another. We've transferred it over.
I think it's also man kicking against God's provision because of all the animals, he's there in the garden, perfection, walking with God, has all the animals, and yet he is alone, and there was no helpmeet found for him. So what does man do? We start to try to look for some sort of replacement of human connection through the animal kingdom, and it
Yeah.
actually pushes us away from human beings because we start to find more joy, in our animals. And I mean, it seems as if the more liberal, if you want to talk the political side, the more liberal a state is, the higher animal rights
Yeah.
get. You can't, you know, one of my relatives had a bat issue for a long time, trying to mitigate and get rid of these bats. And I mean, that company has charged them like $10,000 to get rid of these bats because they can't do anything except humanely let them come down this chute. And I'm not saying that you can't. They make these little plastic chutes that they can go down, but they can't get back up in, and it takes months and months to get these bats to roost in a different area. And it's crazy. I'm not saying we misuse the animal kingdom, but
Right.
it's so interesting how, you know, we're killing babies. We're less value on adults or elderly, and animals
Yeah.
going up and up and up. And to me, it's like the idea of kicking against the curse that God put on man. Um, it's in that same vein of, I'm going to find joy in the animal kingdom. I'm going to find friendship and
Hmm.
relationship in the animal kingdom, not in the being that God made that was after His image.
That's good.
Yeah, and I think people go to the extreme then. They're like, yeah, exactly. That's why I like to kill cats. That's why I just run over dogs
Yeah.
because they're not, and the Lord said that the merciful man doeth, is kind to his own beast, or what does it
Yes.
say?
The
Something
righteous
like
man
that.
regardeth the life of his beast.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treadeth out the corn. I don't think it means that you just. I remember when I was a kid, my dad saying, "Don't touch the eggs, in a nest, because the mother bird, won't want to come back and so forth." And my dad was very concerned about animals, very tender-hearted. But it's a good point that you made, Matt, about how man was by himself with all of the tame animals on the planet, and the Lord said, "You
That's
can't,
good.
you can't do what I put you here to do." And it wasn't. What's interesting, I love the fact that someone pointed out that it doesn't say it's not good for man to be lonely. It said it's not good for man to be alone. A lot of people can be alone and they don't feel lonely because they have their own little universe, their little Minecraft thing that they've set up. They don't want to interact with other people, but God, his goal was for us to connect with other people and then produce something out beyond us. Because what animal has ever written a will and said, "This is what I'd like to do. These are people I'd like to thank." We imagine that they say all this stuff. I know my cat loves me. I know my dog, and I'm sure that they are grateful. But don't think for a minute. Hold on. This is going to be PG-13. Don't think for a minute that your dog wouldn't eat you if you died. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And in fairness, you might eat your dog too. I don't know.
And hunger, yeah.
Not Fluffy.
I remember witnessing to a friend of mine. He eventually came to church. He got saved, the whole nine. But when I was witnessing to him in a restaurant, he was working there, and I was talking to him, and I said, "You ever think about eternity? You ever think about what's beyond this life?" And he said, "All the time." And he said, "Sometimes I go out hunting, and I'm up there in the deer stand, and I look down at the deer, and I'm like, hey, what's the difference between me and that deer?" And I said, "Well, for one thing," I said, "that deer's not sitting here going, I wonder what the difference is between me and that guy up there in the tree." We are different. We're unique. We're unique with a mission. We're not unique as a cul-de-sac. God intended for us to continue.
Brother George, can you think of a biblical illustration where God used man to benefit the animal kingdom? Like the animal kingdom was made for man. I can, like, okay, you could talk about in the Great Judgment, the buzzards, right? And they feed on men's flesh and God can provide for them. But is there a biblical illustration? I guess I'm just sticking with that vein of God made the animals for man and not the other way around. Is there a Bible proof of God reserved these people to preserve the animal kingdom? I know man was supposed to
Uh,
take care
yeah,
of
to
of
subdue,
the
and of
planet.
course, I mean, if it wasn't, the Lord did use human agency to preserve the animals through the flood. So that's like
True.
a, Noah would be the first conservationist, if you will.
That's a good
So,
point. That's good.
the so there's that. That's kind of the go-to. But yeah, just I want to, while you guys were talking about the AI, something struck me too. Is because the verse 26 is God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." And even there, functionally, it's the first function is let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over the cattle and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So our first responsibility was to take care of the animals. So there's something ingrained in us that takes care of a lower order of creation, just like God takes care of a lower order of creation. Forgive me, we're given the responsibility for something weaker than us. And that's tremendous. That's very good for us. Sadly, it devolves into men worshipped the creature more than the creator. And I always thought it's interesting that Paul says more. He doesn't say that they've stopped being believers in God, though some of them do. You've got religious people. They are serving the creator, but the creature more. And it's a reversal of priorities, really. But the very fact that you see people kind of dress up their animals like them. Owner and dog look similar. By the way, people who say that we evolved from chimps because we look like them. People look like their dogs too, so you might as well say that we came from dogs. But the whole idea, like you see owners try to recreate their pets in their image. They dress them up like them. They color match them, and then we are through AI. The goal is to create something intelligent like us that can help us. Well, right there, you are de facto witnessing to the fact that there's a God that created you because you're replicating exactly that. I think it was Mark Twain that he kind of tongue-in-cheek said it, but he said like in the beginning God created man and then man returned the favor. He meant something else. But there's a certain truth to that. This is the very fact that you're trying to create something. You're not letting it. We're not letting AI kind of evolve on its own. We're not just sitting there waiting for it to happen. We are helping it happen. Okay? So, but that very act is a creative act. It's a directed, designed act. And so you're witnessing that you happened by such an act. I mean, the very thing that we're pursuing to disprove God proves that there's a creator. Because you're just doing what you're created in the image of a creator who is creative, and so you are creative yourself. And you're trying to create something in your image that's going to assist you, that's going to give you greater pleasure, just like God did with angels and men. It's inescapable.
They actually
That's a
say,
great point.
yeah, it really is, because they are saying, listen, life came from non-life before. Is it possible for AI to become sentient? And some have theorized that yes, of course, because life came from non-life at the very beginning. And so, of course, this machine made out of silicon, you had, the minerals springing to life, so to speak. I guess they were chemicals at that time, according to evolution. But all of the minerals and everything came from some big bang at some point. It all, and it all sounds very real. But the idea is there was no life, and then there was life. And well, here's the question for AI: why are we so concerned about it? Why can't it just be natural?
Yeah.
It happened once
How come
before.
someone didn't just come up upon this somewhere? This
right.
intelligence totally created.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, even if they do succeed in making it sentient, which they won't, all you will have proven is that it takes a creator.
Well,
Even if you do succeed.
my weird theory is that it will be sentient because it will be inhabited by
Yes.
an evil spirit, angel, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And people will say, well, hey, look, it happened once before, it happened again, not realize that they're actually worshiping the devil through it.
Right.
But anyhow, that's enough of my theories. Okay, so how are we doing with this first part of the 6th day? Feeling pretty good?
Well, I had a question about. We've pretty much been talking about cattle. What's your thought on? And again, I'm just throwing something out there. And he mentions creeping thing in verse 24. He mentions creeping thing, creepeth on the earth in verse 26. Is this the first reference to Satan as far as becoming a serpent or showing himself as a serpent? Is what is this the lower life form, the creeping thing? Does that make sense? I'm finding it. I'm asking basically is this the kind of the first subtle reference to Satan coming in as this serpent on the earth to appear to man?
Well, I never thought of that. I know that the Lord, part of the curse to the serpent was that he was supposed to go on, upon thy belly shalt thou go. And the statement has been made, or the idea has been put forth, that he was not on his belly before then. He was a winged serpent, like a dragon. Of course, we know that he is a dragon. But that idea of that was creeping upon the earth, that's interesting because the scripture does use that term in various other ways. You've got in the New Testament, he's talking about in 2 Timothy, in the last days perilous times will come, talking about those who are lovers of their own selves, and of this sort are they which creep into houses and lead captive silly women. In other words, they can sneak up on you. These things that move silently. And of course, this was before the fall, so you're not seeing the creeping, being connected with sin, but that is something that goes now. People talk about creeps, and that's where it comes from. It comes from silently coming into your presence without recognizing it. And whenever we see that word creeping now, how do modern translations, modern Bible versions, how do they translate that word creeping?
Good question.
ASV says creepeth. The ESV says creeps.
Don't get me started.
The Darby says creeping. They all stick with creeping.
Okay.
But I just see in there just the lower order animals like snakes.
That's what
and
that was my
reptiles.
point. Was that just
Yeah.
an idea of it being the lower life form that the serpent
Yeah.
was cursed further, or Satan. Rather.
Yeah, that's
a
all I
sword.
see there.
Okay.
I just my mind started going because every time I see that word creep, it's one of those, I don't know what those words are that actually sound, or they make you really visualize the thing, and the creeping is one of those words for
Yeah.
me.
Onomatopoeia.
I think those are the ones that sound like
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
like
You're talking about the one
sizzle.
that make you feel it. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Oh, so
So verse 26, I want to talk about the image and likeness, the difference between the two.
okay.
I always thought that was interesting, and checking it in the Bible, how the Bible defines. We kind of, or I can tell in my experience, I always tended to think of them as pretty much the same thing. But across the Bible, the use of the word image, usually, okay, there's an exception or two, but usually, I think one exception, it refers to the bodily, and after our likeness is refers to the spiritually. So we are after the likeness of God in the sense that man can reason and experience emotions and act as a free moral agent. We were talking about being creative like him, but in our image is actually biblically is used to speak of corporeal likeness, not spiritual likeness. So you have the Holy Ghost descending in the bodily shape of a dove. When the Bible talks about Romans 8, Paul talks about that we are to be conformed to his image. In context, it's actually talking conformed physically to his resurrection body. And so from there, you do get the understanding that God is humanoid in shape. And he does have a shape because Jesus Christ himself witnesses to that. And the Bible talks about Moses seeing his back parts. So God does have a shape. And I'm always kind of surprised in Christianity how God has been only perceived as strictly a spirit, but in the spirit in the sense that he's amorphous. He's just like floating out there ethereally, and he has no particular shape. I remember a colleague of mine, an elder at a Pentecostal church, he came back from Walmart, and he's told me he wondered if God was a big smiley face, like the Walmart smiley face. And that's really sad, because in the Bible, the reason why we have eyes the way we have, and hands the way we have, and legs the way we have, is because we are humanoid, reflecting the actual humanoid shape of God, as do the angels. So he really does have eyes and hands. even though they're made of spirit. Not to mention the fact that Jesus Christ, of course, has them now in the form of flesh.
So I think the reason why people say that is because of what John said in John 1 and what Jesus said. No man hath seen God at any time. Not that any man hath seen the Father. That's what, and then John says it in 1 John 4. No man hath seen God at any time. And so that mindset is, well, okay, if man hasn't seen him, then he can't be seen. As opposed to Jesus said, not that any man hath seen the Father, save he which is of God, he hath seen the Father.
Right.
So he has seen the Father, and what does the Father look like? Well, he looks like Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father. He hath declared him. He is the image of God, Christ, who is the image of God, right? So, but that's a very interesting. I mean, that's a little bit above my pay grade at this point in my Christian life. And if you're listening and you feel like a lot of stuff is, don't worry, that'll continue the rest of your life. But you keep your curiosity about God, your interest in God, is what's going to drive your walk with God. But anyhow, I wonder about that concept of, okay, well, what does God look like? Okay, we know that what Jesus looked like, he looked like a man. But people say, God is a spirit. God is a spirit. So how do you reconcile that in your mind?
A spirit has shape. I think a lot. Maybe maybe due to origin and Plato, like the Greek kind of underbase of Western thought, everything's become idealized into nothingness almost. But so we think of spirit as shapeless. But that's why Luke tells us the Holy Ghost, a ghost, right? A spirit descended in bodily shape, like a dove. God before his incarnation, when he hides Moses in the cleft of the rock, he says, "I will cover thee with my hand while I pass by, and I will take away mine hand, and thou shalt see my back parts." And even Jesus Christ, I know that he tells Philip, "He that hath seen me hath seen the Father, because the Father is in me." But then when you get to Revelation, you've got the Father on the throne, and you've got Jesus Christ, and John is seeing him as a lamb with 7 horns and 7 eyes. So you've got the lamb in one kind of a location, geographical location up in heaven, the Father in another on the throne, but he is described as a humanoid. The reason we look like what we look like physically is because God looks like that, not exactly, but like that physically. That's why the angels are humanoid too. You remember that the freak. I should be careful how I say it, because I have a message titled that. But there's a lot of disclaimers, so I don't offend people needlessly. But there's one of the giants that the nephews of David fought, and he had 6 fingers and 6 toes on every foot and hand, and he was of the giants. And so the implication there, because he got his genome partly from the giants, is that the angels have 6 or more fingers on their hands and feet. And mankind is a kind of a lower angel, and so he's got 5. But that's kind of when the Bible says it's like that, you kind of get an idea through that.
I know another 6-fingered man that comes to mind that I've been searching for years and years. And when I find him, I will say to him, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die."
Is he 6-fingered in the movie?
Yes, the 6-fingered man. I have been searching for him all my life. Did we just leave you in the dust, George?
No, I know the movie. I just stopped watching it at the torture scene. I couldn't hack it. No, I think I skipped it.
Was it
I'm like,
UK?
I didn't get it.
Was
I'm
it
like,
too
it's such a lighthearted comic movie, and then you get this. And for me, it completely ruined the movie. So I just I skipped like 15, 20 minutes of it. It's pretty long. I'm like, man, how's this thing gonna end? But I like what Leighton Flowers does with the I don't think this word means what you think it means thing, because he always applies that to like the Calvinists' use of ordination, ordained. They always imagine like predestined selection from eternity past, and I think it's brilliant how he uses that. I'm gonna copy that in an upcoming video. Yeah.
So are you saying that by my referencing that movie that I just sucked 4 years of your life away?
Is that in the movie too?
That was in the part that you skipped. Oh my. Okay. Back to normalcy here, if possible. Hey, normal isn't coming back. Jesus is. Amen. Okay. There's some folks at our church that have that bumper sticker. That's a good bumper sticker.
That's good.
Okay, so yes, that's a sidetrack there. But when you talk about the image of God, there is a part of, and I've heard this. People say stuff, don't they? They just say stuff, and then you get stuck on it. Like for instance, Michael's an archangel, and Gabriel's an archangel. This is something that was told me at a very early age, and the problem is the Scripture doesn't say that at all, right? But the idea that God doesn't have a shape, that Jesus is the shape of God, that and why? Because no man hath seen God at any time. Well, that's an extrapolation. You're saying because no man has seen it, therefore he doesn't have a shape. And also another verse that goes into it, the Spirit like the wind bloweth where it listeth, right? But there's this idea that God is seeking for, he is a spirit, and he's not looking for physical, he's looking for spiritual. But John chapter 4, when he's talking with the woman at the well, and how there's this big distinction made between physical and spiritual, and that the idea is that in the spirit realm, there's really no corporeal appearance. There's no bodily shape. It's just clouds in the spirit realm. Mm-hmm. And it's not that. It's that there is a physical realm and that there is a spiritual realm with which you cannot see with human eyes.
Right. The distinction is between a spirit can have a shape. It's just not flesh. The shape is not made up of flesh, but it's made up of spirit. That's the nuance, because a lot of times we're thinking flesh. So no, it's not flesh, but it still has a shape. He's still a dragon. He can be bound with actual chains. There's the spirits in prison. The Bible talks about in hell. How do you imprison a spirit unless it has some kind of localized, shaped manifestation in its own world?
When I saw, and as we were talking about this, thinking about the beasts, I think about the cherubim with the four face, and how you've got the face of the man, you got the face of the eagle, you got the face of the ox, and then you've got the face of the lion, and how those beasts are in heaven, and those beasts give glory and honor and praise. So then, as I thought about how man is made in God's image, are these beasts made? It doesn't say that, but are these beasts made in the image of those things, or
beasts
similarly to those things? And that you were the first person, George, ever gave me the concept of heaven as being a land, not just a city, but heaven being the capital city of heaven. I don't know, how did you say that?
The heavenly Jerusalem.
Okay,
Jerusalem is the capital city of that realm, yeah.
And that concept of beasts and everything. And sometimes, when you you think about how we got to be careful that we don't say mankind should not worship the beasts and should not, and that is true. But the idea that beasts are these wicked things, it's not true. They're created by God, and they contain some glory in that sense from God, because they're made by God Himself. And those beasts in heaven hold very high places of honor, places of worship, and it's just a good counterbalance to that, because I think you can almost we run to corners. So it's like it's not physical. It's either all physical. Or no, it's not physical at all. It's not even a shape. It's just ethereal. It's spiritual. It's imaginative. It's in your mind. Whereas it's not. It's just as real and it's tangible, but in a different realm.
Precisely so. Matt, you want to say something?
I just like what you were saying right there about beasts, because in my mind, I immediately register as evil. Any beast is evil, but God will say there's evil beasts, right? And even in Titus, he referenced, the culture referenced that they had those evil beasts, right? Slow bellies.
Yeah.
That idea that you can have a beast that's created after God's image in the animal kingdom. And what I'm saying is, I always think beast wicked, but that's sin makes those evil and grotesque and despicable to us. God can even take the baser, beastly side of man, which you can see, like we talk about with Nebuchadnezzar, it slides down to where he's, looking like an animal with long fingernails. It's God that elevates us. It's not man. God elevates us from the baser side of ourselves all the way up. And I love that that imagery of beasts, spiritual beasts, because God can flip people immediately. I was talking to a guy last night on Wednesday night after Wednesday night service, and he's just struggling in his life, and he's just like, man, I don't know what to do. And I said, perfect. I said, you're in the right place. God can make in you a new nature, change you from one to the other. I'm tying that in just a little bit because I always think the word beast in my mind as evil, detestable, and you don't want to be around them. But God has some good beasts out there for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, the cherubims, the beasts, John calls them beasts. They're the highest order of creation. Literally, that's what Lucifer was.
Yeah, they're not technically beasts, are they?
No. Well, just because in Revelation he calls them beasts, but they
are called beasts. That's right.
yeah.
But yeah, beasts in the spiritual realm.
Yeah, and they're free moral agents. So they're a free moral agent. They have a consciousness. They think. They rationalize. They talk. They worship God day and night. They can worship. Animals worship kind of, but not in spirit. But those do. So we're gonna get up into heaven, and there's gonna be creatures up there, all the Genesis 6 stuff, we can hit it when we get there. But all those. What you have in all the mythologies about like a man with the head of a lion, the head of an eagle talking, but that's not completely wrong. In heaven, that's what the cherubims are. You're going to be talking to something that has a humanoid shape with the head of a lion, and it's stunningly beautiful. In fact, it's the most beautiful possible creatures, and you're going to be having conversation with them like we are now. And that's why like all this fantasy genre has such a big market, because something in us relates to that. You almost wish it's true, and it's because it is. To be honest, I'm excited beyond words sometimes to that. I can't wait to get up there, man, and talk to those things. Can you imagine they're gonna have a different culture, a different language, a different way of perceiving the world through their senses, and be able to have an intelligent conversation with something that's got the head of a lion. And for all, we don't even know what a real lion looks like, mind you. So they're lionesque in shape, they're eagle-esque in shape, and they're absolutely brilliant. I can't wait, man. I can't wait.
Well, as I was...
So, can I throw in a little thought there? Maybe our infatuation with animals comes from that desire
to
communicate to them.
Yeah. Well, I've always wondered if we could communicate with them before the fall. Even if we were able to fly. The Lord tells them to have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowls of the fowl of the heaven, verse 28. And I've always wondered, this is just thinking, it's not great, but how in the world do you control an eagle that's flying a kilometer over your head, or in your case, 0.6 miles, unless you can fly, You wonder what abilities we lost. After the fall, there's a French philosopher that basically said man is a fallen god and that has nostalgia of glories past, and there's a lot of truth in that. God knows what. You ever saw the opening of Snow White? I don't know if it's the opening, but I've got scenes in my head. But like she's kind of hanging out the clothes, and then the birds come and they pick up the clothes and they hang them over the clothesline. They're helping her do the dishes. I really think, and it brings a smile to our faces. I think that's what Eve lived. That's the kind of relationship we had with the beasts, and we lost it as a result of the fall. And Jesus Christ coming back with us is going to restore that.
Yeah, when you got Balaam, he says,
Yeah.
the Lord opened the mouth of the ass. So it's shut, right? It was normally shut, but he opened it so that he was just talking, and it was so natural that Balaam just responded. He was upset. He was mad. So, when you're mad, you don't think clearly, but it was like, yeah, listen, I'm talking right now. They're going back and forth with one another, and it's just a natural thing.
But obviously, I'm sure you guys are going to get in chapter 3. But the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the
Uh-huh.
field, and Eve just talks. She's not
Right.
shocked. She's just talking.
Right.
It's like this must. I don't know. I've always wondered that, and just to suppose and think in my mind, okay, this must have happened before in some other form,
Yeah.
maybe with some other animal.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Because
Uh,
yeah, it's picking up in the middle of a conversation. Yeah.
I wanted to
Yeah.
tag on to what you said, Matt, about the Cretians and how the Cretians, their culture was a certain way. And I want to encourage you, just from a devotional, practical standpoint, if you're listening and you feel like, yeah, sometimes I feel animalistic. I have these drives. And, an animal has how many drives? They say 3 drives: a drive to eat, a drive to stay alive, and a drive to procreate. I think, is that the 3 main drives?
I believe you're right.
If something like that. So, when you are when you become more animalistic, you've got these people there in Crete that Titus is supposed to deal with, and he said one of themselves, even a prophet of their own, said the Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, slow bellies. And you may get to that point in your life right now where you may be at that point where you feel like, yeah, that's me. I'm just an animal. Like I can't crawl out of the habits that I have. I have these drives that overcome me. The drive to eat, the drive, the sex drive, the drive for power or whatever, self-preservation. You know what the Lord said? This witness is true. And then he says something that gives us hope. He says, wherefore, rebuke them sharply that they may be sound in the faith. It is possible for you to be an evil beast, but to be corrected by the words of God so that you can be sound in faith. You don't have to continue to be just a slob the rest of your life. So I would say this: if you feel like you're stuck right now as an evil beast, a slow belly, a Cretan. By the way, Cretan is still a word, or a Cretian, whatever. That phrase is still being used, but you may feel that that's where you. Here's what I would encourage you to do: if you're in that place, turn to the one who is rebuking you sharply. Turn to that person, because that is God's gift to you. Turn to the person that is rebuking you, and listen to them. And if they're echoing, if they're repeating the words of God to you, they are your friend, and they're trying to rescue you to keep you from becoming Nebuchadnezzar's beast, out there, wet with the dews of heaven, eating the grass like an ox. God is trying to keep you back from the natural devolving of yourself, and He's going to use godly people who know the truth, and they're going to put some roadblocks in your way and maybe make you mad a little bit. But it's because they're keeping you from the course of this world, that all mankind goes down. And he's saying, stop, young man, stop where you are right here, young lady. Don't go down the road of this road. Everybody else is. But God is being very good to you. So that's my practical application. We're at 103 right now, hour and 3 minutes. So I figure let's wrap it up with some practical devotional takeaways or something else maybe you have to tack on. Brother George, start with you.
Something devotional.
You got anything? I
I'm
mean, can you
drawing.
help? Can you help God's people at all?
The only thing I can say, that when in verse 26, God says, "Let us make man." When God wanted to create fish, He spoke to the sea, and that the waters, and that brought the fish. And when He wanted to create the trees, He spoke to the earth. Let the earth bring forth grass and trees. And then when He created man, He turned to Himself. He said, "Let us." He spoke to Himself. And if you take a fish out of water, which is its natural environment, it will die. And if you remove a tree out from the soil, which is its natural environment, whence it arose, it'll die. And so likewise, God, yes, He formed man out of the earth, but He spoke to Himself when He did it. And so really, man's natural environment is the presence of God. And if you take away man from the presence of God, he does die, which is the reason why we're dying literally, physically, because we got cast out of the garden. So the life is in the presence of God, and you cannot exist outside that environment. You cannot have a spiritual life outside that environment. And so repentance towards the Lord literally leads you back to life.
In Thy presence is fullness of joy.
That's right. Yeah, Thou wilt show me the path of life. Amen.
It's good. Matt?
God desires that. God desires that fellowship with mankind so much that He would send His Son to redeem man. And man, what you're saying there, John, with Titus, I've often thought about how Cretans living in such a beautiful place become liars, evil beasts, and slow bellies.
Hmm.
Well, same way Adam and Eve became sinners in a beautiful, sinless garden. And that is our own wicked heart. And if we're left to ourselves, we do slide down to that evil beast category. We're supposed to be helping and dominating the animal kingdom below us, but we, instead of looking up to God, we start looking back down to them, and that slides us back down, like you were saying, to the hog pen again. And what's cool to me about Titus is in 3 chapters, Paul says, hey, Titus, get there to that island. I want you to ordain elders in every city. By the time you're done, you're supposed to have ordained elders in every city. And oh yeah, by the way, here's the trifold advertisement for the island of Crete, written by themselves, that says there's a bunch of slow bellies, evil beasts, and liars.
There's your evangelistic campaign motto.
Welcome to Crete.
Who's ready for a missions trip to Crete?
Can anybody say location? And what's amazing to me is in these 3 chapters, he nails down. I call Titus a field manual for spiritual leaders. It's like this little manual that you take with you, as a pastor, and reference it. And what's so cool is the change that Paul is expecting that the gospel will make on liars and evil beasts and slow bellies. In so much that he delineates each demographic in the next chapter and says, hey, teach them sound doctrine. Teach the aged men to be sober, sound in the faith. Where do we learn to not go to our baser sorts? We learn it from the Holy Spirit. We learn it from the Word of God. But we also follow the example of other people that live a higher life with God. And that my devotional thought is the gospel can change people from a liar, from an evil beast, a slow belly, lazy people that, frankly, probably didn't do much on the island. Island life can kind of cultivate that kind of lifestyle. And he said, no. Old men, young men, older ladies, younger ladies, here's what God's expecting for you on that isolated place. You can be holy with the gospel. And I think it's such a cool thing what the gospel can do.
That's good. Really good. That's a blessing. Well, Matt, it's been a pleasure to have you with us today. We've enjoyed it a great deal, even though it was last minute. And I think maybe the best thoughts are the ones that come with the repartee, the connection, interconnectivity. Sometimes because the whole point of this podcast is just to consider the things of God and chew the fat a little bit. And I want you to think, if you're listening, this is not definitive. We're asking a lot of questions. Because that's how you learn, is asking questions, staying curious. And there are definitive answers in Scripture. Of course, those are the only real definitive answers. But we want you to be curious and to think about how God has placed these things in the Bible. And we want to hear from you as well. You can email us at witsendguys@gmail.com, witsendguys@gmail.com. Hope that you'll plan to join us. Any final party words, anybody? Brother George.
Next time I'll prepare a little bit more, and I'll have some Ranasarai myself available. I'll have big words prepared too.
Okay. I love it. You're muted still, Brother George. Testing. Can't hear you. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Sorry, I'm done. I was double muted.
Okay. Well, you guys take care, and we love you. Keep serving the Lord, and we will talk to you again next time. God bless.